Hi, everyone. I wanted to come on today and talk about something that is very fundamental in astrology over the next 3 years. And I'm calling it the big picture because it's a kind of very important, incredibly rare, and I believe unique configuration between the outer planets that is already in place but is going to get stronger, particularly over the next couple of years. It's going to really last through 2027, and then from kind of around about August, September time 2028 really start fading out. But it's particularly strong through 2025 and 2026. All astrologers will be talking about this. I will be adding massively to what I'm talking about today. And so this is quite skeletal in a way. But the reason I felt it was so important to film today, and I'm filming on the 27th of March, is that I've become increasingly aware through March, particularly from mid-March, from the total lunar eclipse, which was very dramatic for me, my birthday, that many people are sensing a very different energy, a very different dimension. Many people going through upgrades, and if you're not, that's fine too. We are each on our individual journeys with our own individual timetables, but nevertheless, the direction of travel is to a higher dimension and a radical change in consciousness. And I wanted to do this today because I actually feel the next few days are incredibly important. I've already filmed a video about Neptune in Aries, and I'll put the link for that below. But because Neptune is at the anaretic degree, the very last degree of Pisces, and the shadow side of Pisces is victim consciousness, I believe one of the big shifts once Neptune moves into Aries on the 30th of March is shedding that victim consciousness and starting to step into our mastery. And that could not be more important in terms of how that affects your life, your own reality, but also how it feeds into the collective. This is our year, our time moving forwards of mastery, of stepping out of that victim consciousness. So set a clear intention for yourself. As of now, I am shedding any victim consciousness from the past to begin to step into my mastery. Something like that. Choose your own words. But that's how big I think this is. I think it's a really unique shift for humanity. And I'm not hopefully given to hype generally, but I feel that this week, and I think Nancy Rebecca was absolutely spot on. I think she absolutely nailed it when a month or so back she was talking about this surge of energy, which will be peaking on the 29th of March, which she didn't realize was a solar eclipse, through to the 7th of April. I feel this upcoming week is a kind of portal for us that is the most powerful portal to make those decisions, to shed victim consciousness, to step into mastery, to start to live from the inside out, which is something I've been talking about for the last, I think, 3 years, living from the inside out, deciding how you are going to take charge of your life. And does that mean there are not going to be big, scary things in the world? No, it absolutely doesn't mean that. Things are going to accelerate through April. They're going to be very lively. They're going to be very dynamic. They're going to be 10 tons of stuff happening at the 3D level. But the more attention you give to that, the more it will have a place in your reality and affect your state of being. The less attention you give to all of those big scary things, starve out the scary, love in the good, the less effect it will have in your reality and your consciousness. I gave away my television 5 years ago, and so I don't really tune in very much. I've got a broad awareness of what's happening in the world, but I'm not really interested in the 3D world because it's so much more important about what we're doing with our consciousness, because everything starts from energy. That's what's absolutely fundamental. So I hope that's helpful for you, and I hope the the skeletal picture I'll be drawing today and adding massively to it, of course, over the next 3 years is going to be helpful to you. So what I'd like to share with you are really the configuration that the outer planets are going to be making over these next 3 years, beginning now. This is already operational right now. And to credit Ray Merriman, a wonderful, brilliant astrologer, Ray Merriman, he feels that this has actually never happened in history before. We're going to be looking at the trine between Uranus and Pluto. We're also going to be looking at the midpoint of that, which is Neptune and also Saturn. Now, Neptune comes to the midpoint of Pluto and Uranus trine about every 500 years, but it doesn't do that at 0 of Aries. The degree with the greatest pure potential for what we can create. And that's why rarity gives potency. Rarity gives potency. The less frequent something is astrologically, the more powerful potentially it is. So in these next few days, running up until the 30th, and we haven't got many of them left, it's just like the energy dissolves. It goes into a sea of consciousness, if you like. It dissolves into mush, if you like, in the chrysalis of the caterpillar. And therefore, we have the greatest potential, and Dr. Jude Currivan talked about this, we have the greatest potential to form it into whatever we would like, to get the greatest change in state of being. It's the highest potential state when it's in chaos, when it's dissolved, when the old world is collapsing, to really make a jump in our consciousness. So I hope this is going to be helpful for you. Okay, let me begin to share my screen here. So I call this the big picture. And I'm going to keep this very simple because, first of all, I'm going to look at the trine between Uranus and Pluto, which is already operational. I'm basing all of these charts on the 7th of September. And again, ignore the clock face because I'm basing it on London. So we're just looking at some very simple aspects here. Now, the seed point for any aspect is the conjunction between the two planets, when Uranus and Pluto come together. And that doesn't happen very often. It happens about every 127 years. And if we go back in history, one of the times it happened previously was in 1595 to 1598. These two planets were conjunct. That was in Aries at the time. And that was when, just to give you an example of this, because Uranus is, as we know, linked to earthquakes, it's linked to volcanoes, it's linked to breakthroughs in understanding Pluto that are fundamental. It's often connected to how we see the nature of our reality. It's the higher octave of Mercury. It's our superconscious intuition. I often refer to it as the mind of God, particularly when it's in an air sign like Gemini, which it will be by September. It moves into Gemini in July. And so Uranus can bring about a kind of shift in perception, a sudden radical shift in perception. So it is about radical sudden change. It's the planet of awakening. And Pluto is about destructuring and restructuring. It's about fundamental deep change. Snake shedding a skin, things will never be the same again. So both of them are about change. In the case of Uranus, it's sudden radical change, a shift of perception. Those moments of heightened intuition and awakening. Pluto is about deep fundamental change. So that's the seed point. So as I say, one of the early seed points, if we go back in history, was 1595 to 1598. That was when Galileo was really beginning his studies into the laws of motion. And indeed, it was through all that work that he eventually produced the telescope. I think that was in 1609, which was just going beyond the conjunction, but nevertheless his work was happening. His intense work was happening at that conjunction of Uranus and Pluto. Equally, Johannes Kepler, another incredible astronomer and astrologer, in 1595, he was actually drawing on a blackboard, and he suddenly had this realization that the universe was actually composed of a series of geometric figures, of trines and triangles and squares and very geometric shapes, sacred geometry. And that was the beginning. Those repeating patterns which you could see in the planetary movements in the heavens led to Kepler's laws of planetary motion, which are absolutely fundamental to our understanding of the universe today. And he also worked with a brilliant astrologer, Tycho Brahe, and they developed evidence for highly accurate astronomical evidence for the heliocentric theory that appeared in 1543 from Copernicus' publishing of the heliocentric theory. So although that conjunction was in Aries, which of course is pioneering, breaking new ground, it's even more powerful that we are going to be understanding the heavens, the cosmos in a much bigger way, because Uranus is the planet, it's a sky god in myth, linked to aviation. It rules it rules Aquarius. That's where Pluto is right now. And Pluto always intensifies the sign it's moving through. They are both in air signs at this point, Gemini, Aquarius. So we are going to be learning so much more about the cosmos, the galaxies, and consciousness. I think this is just almost beyond my vocabulary, actually. So much happening in that area. I just want to follow another thread through as well, going back even further in history. In 1450, a man called Gutenberg, he's a German gentleman, invented the printing press. And that was in 1450. That was during another Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Now, Uranus, think of it as a higher octave of Mercury. I did a whole chapter on this. I wrote a whole chapter on this in my first book, You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? And I kind of followed this track through, that Mercury, we know, is the planet of communication. And we think of it as the messenger. But Uranus, if we follow history through, has taken this to a higher level, because Gutenberg developed the printing press at this previous Uranus-Pluto conjunction in 1450. There was then an opposition between Uranus and Pluto from 1643 to 1653. That was a time of huge social and political upheaval across many geographies. That was the time of the English Revolution. But in England, this was the time when letter writing, communication, became very prevalent, and the wealthy people had servants to deliver their mail, their letters, and they called these servants little Mercuries. Just incredible. And even working class people began to write at that time. Remember, it was a very structured society at that time. And writing became an instrument of revolution, because pamphlets and newspapers, etc., became, in fact, the printing press really had been a forerunner of mass communication that enabled future revolutions, because information could spread more easily than it had done before. And in fact, if we follow that through, printing press, 1450, spread of literacy and letter writing at the opposition between Uranus and Pluto, the Industrial Revolution, from sort of 1707 to 1707 to 1715 was another conjunction between Uranus and Pluto, and that was really the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and that further encouraged the development of printing presses. And then we had, in 1848, the invention of the electric telegraph. That was another hard aspect between Uranus and Pluto. And in 1876, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. So they were all hard aspects. And by hard, I mean conjunction, square, opposition between Uranus and Pluto. So most definitely, and particularly this time around, because Uranus is in Gemini, this is going to be a very, very powerful time for communication, for the internet taking massive leaps beyond where it is right now, and also an understanding of our neural network, an understanding of consciousness. And I profoundly feel meeting with other galactic beings and big quantum jumps coming in our consciousness from that. We also had in 1969, and in the late 60s, we had a lot of space travel, and we had the apparent landing on the moon in 1969. And again, that was actually a conjunction between Jupiter, Uranus, and Pluto. And whatever actually happened there, that was a breakthrough in collective consciousness, because we were all sitting watching our televisions, watching men apparently land on the moon. Another big theme of Uranus-Pluto is revolution. We can go back to when there was a conjunction last time around in the mid-60s. It was particularly exact between 1965 and 1966. That was the development of the microchip, nanotechnology, because Uranus is very technological in its developments. We also had a lot of revolution at that time. We had, the Prague Spring, actually a little later in 1968, when the Czechoslovaks rose up against their governments. We had so many protests in the mid-60s. We had the Black Power movement, we had women's rights, we had gay rights, we had huge social unrest. We had, this was time of hippiedom, the hippies. They were living in communes and talking about peace and love. They were anti-war protests against the Vietnam War. There were big student sit-ins in the late 60s as well. All over the world, students were sitting in, protesting in their universities that they wanted a more loving world. They wanted to end war. They wanted peace. They wanted love. Remember all the slogans. Remember the Beatles music. It was an incredibly powerful time of creative enrichment. Remember the amazing music that came out of the 1960s. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, etc., and a lot more. It was known for incredible art and music at that time. If we go back, actually thinking of this theme of revolution, if we go back to another conjunction of Uranus and Pluto between 1845 and 1856, the year 1848 was it was known as the year of revolution in Europe. It was known as the year of revolution because a lot of the harvests failed. There was extreme weather, and people rose up. People rose up right across the board, and those revolutions were enabled again by the spreading of the written word, that news could travel very quickly. And so it was an incredible period. And again, I'll write about this in my first book, but the monarchy in France fell in 3 days. In Vienna, it fell in 2 days. The uprising spread across Italy, Germany, Bavaria, Denmark, Holland, Sweden, Czechoslovakia, Ireland, England, incredible Asia, China, Japan. because then we had the steam train and the electric telegraph, as well as early newspapers that allowed this information about revolution to spread very quickly. If we look a little further into this cycle, we also had a square. If I just backtrack slightly, actually, to that time of revolution, Marx was writing his Communist Manifesto in 1848, the same year as the year of revolution. So if we now move forwards to more recent times, we had a square between Uranus and Pluto. Again, all these hard aspects have got similar themes. You may remember in April 2011, we had the Arab Spring. And again, what allowed those fossilized governments in the Arab countries to fall literally within days was then another level of communication, which was social media. Young people, Uranus, organized their protests via social media platforms. At the time, it was Twitter, it was Facebook, it was Instagram, whatever, and that's how they communicated. And that was beneath the oversight, if you like, of governments, and that enabled literally people who had been in power in those Arab countries for decades fell in days. So this is the power of Uranus-Pluto hard aspects, but the last conjunction was in the 60s, particularly exact 1965 to 66. So that was the seed point for what we're going to experience at this positive aspect, which is the trine. This is a blossoming of whatever was seeded then. So this is very much about a new paradigm, and we are entering paradigm-shattering times. That's very linked to Pluto in Aquarius. I've been talking about that for the last 3 years, and if you go back to my Pluto in Aquarius videos, you'll hear me saying that. It's a shattering of paradigms. We're starting to see that, I think, with some discoveries underneath the pyramids, and we're going to learn more about that. But it's going to be not just that. It's going to be a lot of ancient civilizations and peoples who live under the earth, a lot of beings that live out in the cosmos that are our family. They are our relatives because we equally are galactic citizens. It's interesting, I have to go back to 577 and 576 BCE to find a conjunction between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto within 2 degrees. You know, that is the rarity of what we're looking at here, because all the planets I'm looking at have very long, slow orbits. So let us look at the next step in this. So I'm going to put in here, and again, I'm still arbitrarily looking at September here. And we have Neptune, which I say is entering Aries on the 30th of March. It will stay in that early degree of Aries until October, retrograde back into Pisces, and then move forwards again into Aries in January 2026 and stay there until March 2039. We're looking at very, very long orbits. Saturn will move into Aries on the 25th of May, but by September it has already started to retrograde back into Pisces, but it also moves forwards into Aries in February 2026 and holding hands exact to the degree and minute on the 20th of February 2026, they move forwards together. So this is an incredibly powerful period. Now, as I said, Neptune appears at this midpoint of the Pluto-Uranus trine only about every 500 years, but it doesn't do it at 0 of Aries. This degree, the creator degree, the degree of pure potentiality. And that is why I believe Ray Merriman said that this has never happened before with Neptune at that 0 degrees, and particularly because it's conjunct Saturn there as well. So We have other aspects coming in. Now, I've already made a video on Neptune in Aries, so I won't repeat everything I've said in that. I'll put the link for that below. As we get closer towards May, I'm going to be doing a Saturn-Neptune video about them both being in Aries. So again, but in short, it's about making real the dream. That we have this completely blank slate, I believe, as humanity to move into a totally different consciousness, state of being, where we can change our world. I mean, I truly think we have more opportunity than we have ever had in this lifetime and many, many lifetimes. And I really don't mean to sound as if I'm kind of hyping this. I believe this profoundly in my bones because of things that have happened to me personally this month, which have, been very, very deep for me. So probably because my Mercury is being aspected in this too. So this brings in other things. So we here have a sextile between Neptune and Pluto and Neptune and Uranus. So Neptune-Pluto, the last conjunction, the seed point between Neptune and Pluto, because that has a synodic cycle of 493 years. This last happened it was exact in 1891 to 1893. So it was the early 1890s. And that was in Gemini. So there were big, big developments in transport at that time, because Gemini is linked to transport. Cars were developed. This was early development in cars. And also, the combustion engine, which led to development in aviation as well. We're going to see 10 tons more of that because this sextile is also picking up Uranus. And of course, Aquarius is linked to aviation as well. But I think the big theme here is that was the beginning of quantum physics. The 1890s, this was when Max Planck was developing his quantum theories, and he was really renouncing previous physics that had gone before and introducing this concept of quanta of energy, discontinuous packets of energy, which he called quanta. So no longer was he seeing energy as a continuous, steady, linear stream. He was seeing it as kind of bursts of energy. And to quote Max Planck, he said, "I regard matter as derived from consciousness." So this was the beginning of the observer effect and how we as co-creators can start to affect energy to produce manifestation. So, quantum physics has now been going for over 100 years, but the beginning of it was when we had the conjunction between Neptune and Pluto. When you have, and actually if you were born in the 1950s, in the early years of the 1950s, you will also have a sextile between these two planets. Very often, if you have a hard aspect between these planets natally, a conjunction, square, opposition, or you experience a transiting Neptune to your Pluto or transiting Pluto to your Neptune, this can bring in the paranormal, the supernatural, suddenly seeing ghosts or spirits or orbs or experiencing beyond the normal 3D dimension. There's a kind of stepping behind the veil very often. So this is, again, sextiles are very beneficial. All of these, the trine, the two sextiles are very beneficial aspects. They're not hard aspects. So some astrologers are calling this a basket, some are calling this a mini trine or a mini grand trine. Whatever you call it, these are beneficial aspects. So we are in an extremely creative period, I think it's fair to say. One of the previous times, again, if I can just go back to this, that Uranus-Pluto was conjunct, and that was exact around 1710, 1711. That was really the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So we are going to have another huge jump, and actually the conjunction in the in the 60s, 1965, 66 was the beginning of the information age. I think we had our first internet transition, if I'm not wrong, in 1964. And that was the beginning of the World Wide Web in the late 60s. So, we had the Industrial Revolution, we then had the information age, the information revolution. This is a cosmic revolution. This is a galactic revolution we're now entering, which is very, very different. But Uranus and Aquarius are planets of revolution, and they're planets of freedom and humanitarianism, demanding greater equality. So again, if you go back to the 60s and all of those protests, whether it's gay liberation, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, it was all about demanding that everybody in society had a voice, an equal voice, demanding greater equality in society. And that's going to come up big time this time around as well. I would just like to remind you, because I didn't mention it in my Neptune in Aries video, that there is a very beautiful Sabian symbol for 1 degree of Aries. And remember, with the Sabian symbols, which were downloaded by a wonderful psychic called Elsie Wheeler, I think in the 1920s, 1930s, it was very early. And they're very poetic, but very accurate for the degree. But what you have to do is round up to the next degree to get the correct Sabian symbol. So Neptune is entering 0 of Aries on the 30th of March. If we read the Sabian symbol for 1 degree of Aries, it's very beautiful. It's a woman rises out of the water and a seal rises and embraces her. Isn't that absolutely beautiful? A woman rises out of the water, a seal rises and embraces her. And if I follow James Burgess, who often embellishes these Sabian symbols, he calls this the emergence out of the realm of potentiality into the realm of reality. And whatever is potential for us is going to be made real, I think, once Saturn begins to move into Aries on the 25th of May. Whatever we are dreaming in, Neptune, starts to become more real, and even more real from February 2026. So this is, and again, James Burgess talks about this Sabian symbol at 1 degree of Aries, becoming the seed essence of your soul's incarnation. Absolutely beautiful. So we have this pure potentiality that has not yet taken form, particularly moving out of the last degree of Pisces. And it is Saturn's job to make that real, to make it take form. So challenge to all of you, what are you dreaming in? From this very moment that you watch this video, who are you already becoming? Make this big, make this a big jump for yourself. Internal jump, because everything starts from inside you. Everything is inside you. So let's just think about this, this sextile here too. When you have this natally or by transit aspects between Neptune and Uranus, they are really connected to other realms of consciousness. That you can often experience dimensions of reality you didn't even believe existed. It's very mystical. Again, you kind of break through the 3D veil. So very profound. And if we go back to the seed point of that, that was in 1993. And from that point on, really, new philosophies, new spiritual philosophies started to be developed. Because from 1993, we've had a great blossoming in interest in all kinds of spiritual disciplines, in meditation, in sound healing, in esoteric philosophies in Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, all of those different religions, and that has really blossomed in so many ways. People regularly meditating and candle gazing, etc. So this is going to bring in, I think, much more spirituality into our lives and experiences of other dimensions. We are going beyond the current dimensions of the 3D, for sure. The seed point for Saturn-Neptune was actually back in 1989, and it was just so literal and so graphic. It was November 1989, I remember distinctly, and that conjunction was in Capricorn, and that was the time of the collapse of the Berlin Wall. So you had the structure, Capricorn, of the Berlin Wall. I was there actually at the time. I bought a chunk of the Berlin Wall because young people were climbing all over it and kind of breaking it up with axes and hammers and selling bits of it. I remember, I've still got that piece somewhere, because it was a massive symbolism of the collapse of the old order. That was the beginning of the collapse of the Soviet Union, you might remember, and the division between West and East Germany. And so Saturn-Neptune conjunction here is, again, this is going to increase the dissolution of the old order, the old traditional structures, governments, corporations, institutions, also things like traditional religions and monarchies, top-down vertical structures that are traditional and unequal. They will increasingly be dissolved with that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And so we're getting some very clear themes here of more freedom, greater equality demanded in society, dissolution of verticality, dissolution of the rulers telling the poor people what to do. And again, I've talked about that at great length in other videos. So grassroots up, communities is how we're going to move forwards. And really the last piece of this I'd like to look at, and as I say, I'm going to be adding massively to this over the next 3 years, as every astrologer is. Uranus, again, I'm still just sticking to this arbitrary date of September. I'll go into more detail about dates in a moment, but Uranus then becomes conjunct to Sedna. Now, even as of July 2025, I think 7th of July 2025, Uranus moves into Gemini, and it is instantly going to be by sign conjunct. It's already actually technically conjunct out of sign to Sedna, but it becomes within sign conjunct to Sedna. Now, this is a real point of ignition, I believe, to humanity's metamorphosis. And again, I've talked about that in the video that I did called Metamorphosis for Humanity. I'll put the link for that below. But this truly is about a change of state, a change of consciousness, neural network, Gemini, in trine to Pluto. Whenever we have Pluto in Aquarius, I've mentioned it in a couple of other videos, whenever that happens, and because Pluto's got a 248-year orbit, it doesn't happen very often. It was last in Aquarius in 1798. We discover more of the out there of the cosmos. We go beyond our current knowledge. So stronger telescopes will be developed. I think this will for sure be more galactic connection. And we are going to discover and understand more about our cosmos and our galaxies than we have ever done before. So I think space exploration, just like it was, remember, at the seed point of the 1960s, a big era of space exploration in the late 1960s when this conjunction was last exact. Again, the blossoming again, more further out space exploration for sure over these next 3 years. And also, let us hope, more peace, more love. But also because Sedna is coming into the picture here. And remember this beautiful Sabian symbol for 1 degree of Aries about the seal embracing the woman. God, how exquisite that is. The seal embracing the woman as she emerges from the sea. This is about interspecies connection. I was just going so goosebumpy. This is about this sense of oneness that's going to be rebirthed and remembered in us, of telepathy with animals and trees and plants and birds. This is about our remembrance of one consciousness, and we are just divine fractals, each of us, thoughts of God, of that one consciousness. It's just so exciting, I think. And seals, as we know, and listen to Joan Ocean and her beautiful, beautiful work talking about seals and whales being 15th dimensional consciousness, very linked to Lemurian culture. And they are here to, so emotional at this point because they're here to guide us. The animals are here to guide us. They are way ahead of us. The dolphins, the whales, the turtles. And remember the myth of Sedna. Remember the myth of Sedna. That when her father chopped her fingers off to stop her climbing back into the canoe in the storm, and she sank to the depths of the Arctic seas, and her fingers became beautiful sea creatures of dolphins and whales and turtles. And she became a sea goddess in the very deep, deep icy wastes of the Arctic, and she is still there as a sea goddess. Change of state. But how it connects to this sapient symbol of the seal embracing the woman. And if the seal is ready to embrace the woman, that suggests we are living in a much more heart-centered way. We've got to the point, or the beginning of the point, that we realize it is insane to exploit and pillage nature, because we are nature, we are part of nature. And therefore, this sense of being one with nature, in harmony, every sentient being having respect, having love, having care, getting back to that balance, that harmony, that love, that heart-centered existence with all living beings. I think that's what is being promised here too. But with Sedna coming in here, as I say, this is the ignition point for the new human, I believe. Again, I've talked about that in recent videos. But I also think, as well as the exploration out there in space, there's going to be exploration deep down, because Sedna is deep, deep down in the Arctic Ocean, the Arctic seas. So I think we are going to discover, we know so little about our seas and all they have to offer us in terms of very powerful plant medicines and algae and so much, the primary water underneath the mantle of the earth, and even the inner earth beings that we know so little about. I think all of this is going to come to the fore. And this is the promise, this is the astrological architecture, the promise of where we are literally, I believe in my bones, at the beginning of this very week, as I'm filming this on the 27th of March, 2025. It's very big. So truly live from your heart. Live from your heart, trust. Please don't give the bad news any attention. The more you do, the bigger it'll be in your reality. Starve it out. Focus your entire energy, attention, momentum on how can we create a magnificent, heart-centered, loving earth for every sentient being. That's where I'm headed. Now, just to explain a little more, and remember, just to say, this transformation, this transmutation, this metamorphosis, this evolution for humanity isn't happening out there. This is happening through us, through our physicality, through every cell in our being. And that's the difference in terms of previous incarnations where we got close but didn't quite make it. I understand we got quite close in Atlantis and then kind of failed because I think we're tampering a little too much with technology and trying to merge technology. And, you know, I personally am headed for a much more organic route. But this transmutation, this transformation, this metamorphosis is happening through us individually as human beings. And that's the big difference. And that's why we've got to live from the inside out to feel this. So really embrace this. This is the beginning of a cosmic consciousness, a galactic consciousness. This is what I feel. And this is going to be strong, as I say, for the next 3 years. It's going to come kind of in and out of exactitude because all of these planets are moving. You know, Pluto has a 248-year orbit. Saturn has a 29.5-year orbit. Neptune has a 165-year orbit. Uranus has an 84-year orbit. Saturn has an 11,400-year orbit. So they're all moving at different speeds. So it's a little bit kind of jiggy as we go through. But essentially, this year, 2025, it's going to be round about 1 degree that you're going to see these outer planets. Pluto 1 degree of Aquarius, Neptune 1 degree of Aries, Sedna and Uranus 1 degree of Gemini. If you have any planets or angles at 1 degree, they're going to be aspected by these planets. And, you know, that's far too complicated. That would take me days and days and days to go through every, you know, possible mutation of what that would mean for you. But the hard aspects of the conjunction, the square, the opposition are by far the most powerful in your own chart, because it's like the grit in the oyster that provokes action to create the beautiful pearl. If it's a sextile or a trine, it's an easier manifestation. But the hard aspects, don't dread the hard aspects because they produce action in your life. So this year, particularly August and September time, this configuration I'm looking at here is going to be the closest at about 1 degree. So anything you've got at 1 degree of pretty much any sign, you're going to receive aspects from these outer planets. Next year, particularly, it's going to be July. They're going to come into aspect at 4 degrees of their signs. Okay, Pluto will have moved on to 4 degrees, Uranus will have moved on to 4 degrees, etc. So anything around about 4 degrees. By 2027, particularly around June, it's most exact around 6 degrees. Anything at 6 degrees. And, you know, give or take a degree either side, but I'd keep it tight. I'd keep it tight to a degree or so either side. 2025, as I've been kind of intuiting or anticipating, is the most powerful year of transition, of change, of turbulence. Because all of the outer planets are changing sign between now, March 2025, and April 2026. And they are also, as they change sign, many of them, and that's true here of Saturn, Neptune, is they are hitting the world axis, 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. And therefore, when we have these planets, these outer planets aspecting 0 and 1 degrees of the cardinal signs, we are going to feel those effects in the world, on the public stage, in a bigger way. That's why 2025 is a really, really, really big year. Biggest year of our lifetime, as I said back in January. So 2026, this will continue. And things, for me, I think will start to settle a little as we get into kind of April, May, June next year. This will still be very strong. Also 2027. And then as we get into sort of mid-2028, this is fading out. So these next 3 years are extraordinary. And it's a change of state for us, a change of being. No, that's going to be, you know, this, I do think there's a bifurcation. Absolutely. I do think there's a bifurcation. And if you're focused on the big scary stuff, I'm going to start to stop share now. if you're focused on all the difficult, the scary things, the awful things, the destructive things that are happening in the world, remember that's what will be your reality. And only you choose that. Nobody forces you, as I always say. Only you are choosing that. And if you choose to focus on love, on joy, on being heart-centered, on coming together in community with other people, on sharing, on really making the world a more loving place, that will be your reality. And you'll find that opportunities, people, circumstances will just pop into your reality to feed that frequency that you're on. But I do think we're moving into a cosmic and galactic frequency and a consciousness now that we've never known before. So that bifurcation will continue. You know, the difficult will get louder and more difficult. The more loving will become even more loving. That is my humble view. That's my sense of it. And I want to end with a quote from a remarkable man called Andre Barbault. I'll give the spelling below. He was a French philosopher, really, visionary, and an incredibly brilliant astrologer. He died, I think, in 2018, which was very sad because he had actually predicted the pandemic of 2020. Quite remarkable. He'd predicted that quite some years ago. And I want to read to you what he wrote, what he said about this particular configuration I've been focused on now. The next conjunction of Saturn-Neptune in 2026, he's talking about the exact 20th of February 2026, but we're into that conjunction already, is centrally placed at the beginning of Aries and in a triangular quartet of planets with a double sextile to a trine between Uranus and Pluto, which is what we've just been looking at. It's the most benefic configuration of the century, and its interplanetary partnership will work for the best in a splendid relaunch of civilization. A splendid relaunch of civilization. That's a very good note to end on. So much more to come, but really feel excited. I mean, I know there are kind of war drums all over the place, but feel excited about the power of your co-creation. Really step into that. Yes, it's invisible. Know that it's energy. Know that you can work with that modeling clay that is this very week being released in that very last degree of Pisces as Neptune transits it and begins a whole new cycle for humanity beginning on the 30th of March. And you know, I've really felt this in my bones, actually. And as I say, I think Nancy Rebecca got a bullseye. I think she was really spot on with what she was seeing and hearing from the blue light beings. So big shout out to Nancy. God bless. I really hope that's helped you. There's been a lot in there, a lot of astrology. But I really hope it's helped to give you some confidence and some joy and some extra love in your heart today. God bless. Be back very soon. Bye for now.